Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Jane Dixon Weber, the Director of Education and Support Services at the National Fragile X Foundation. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, the Foundation's Guide to Participating in Studies and Trials. Hilary Rosselot is our presenter this evening, and she'll be joined by parents Jen Barber and Lesley Weaver. Before we begin, these webinars are made possible by your donations. Thank you for your ongoing support. We have about a 25-minute presentation, and then we'll take questions for the remainder of the hour. You can ask questions using the right side of your screen. I'll read those at the end of the presentation. Now I would like to introduce Hilary. Hilary joined the Foundation team a little over a month ago. And prior to joining the Foundation team, she worked at Cincinnati Fragile X Research and Treatment Centers for over 5 years. She has experience as a clinical research coordinator across many types of clinical trials and served as the clinical research manager for the Cincinnati program. She has a bachelor's in psychology and an MBA. Welcome, Hilary.
Well, thank you, Jane. Well, welcome everybody to the webinar. We're so excited that you signed up. And today, we're really going to talk through debunking research for you. So giving you the tools for your toolkit in order to go into, considering research to the best of your ability. So let's get started. I know I haven't had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you, but I hope I will one day. And so I just kind of wanted to break the ice a little bit and tell you a little bit about me. So Jane covered a lot of that, but I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I got my bachelor's at the University of Cincinnati and went to Xavier for my MBA. And I worked at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center for a little over 5 years. And I actually have participated in research myself. So I think that's important to share with you because it can be really easy to encourage you to do it. But it would be a little hypocritical if I was, talking the talk without walking the walk. So, here's a bunch of pictures of me, which I'm sure you're thrilled to see. I really like coffee. I have a cat named Stella. And if you have any familiarity with Cincinnati, you know that the zoo had a baby hippo. There's a pretty cute mural here showcasing her. If you ever come, I'd love to, take you to dinner and kind of show you around. Okay, so let's get started. So today our goals are really to, understand what clinical research is, what you should expect if you're considering, participating in a study or trial, and really understand why research is important. But like Jane said, the goal today is to really answer questions and debunk research for you. And I have two, incredible women who have participated in trials and research studies with their children. And you're probably going to learn a lot from them, maybe even more so than me. So let's get started. So what is clinical research? So clinical research is anything to do with people, whether it's, actually, having them participate in their research, their children, using their data or their biological samples to understand health and different diagnoses. So when we're doing research, we're trying to find new and better ways to detect, diagnose, treat, and prevent different diseases. Most clinical research falls into two different categories, meaning it can be interventional or observational. So interventional is intentional placing of the research participants into groups and seeing if placing them into a group and comparing them tracks change, if there's any, impact. And then observational is more observing people in their natural habitat. So some common examples of clinical research. So I kind of categorize them to showcase, in line with what the My Fragile X research portal looks like. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit later, but what I think is awesome is the Foundation has launched this new tool to really help you look at different research studies and find a good match for you. So there are clinical trials, right? These are interventional, you're assigned to a group, and those groups are compared to see if, the treatment is really impactful. There's clinical research studies, which are typically more observational. So you're more observing people and their treatment plan and seeing if there's an impact that way. And there's also survey research. But really, lots of people use those terms interchangeably, and I think it's important to know the difference. So it's a little blurry, but I like to think of it as squares and rectangles. So I'm sure you remember in grade school when your teacher told you that all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So, all clinical trials are technically clinical research studies, but not all clinical research studies are clinical trials. So, all clinical trials are research, right? They're with people, they're hoping to find new ways to detect, treat, prevent, but they're not, but we're putting people into groups and comparing them versus, research studies can sometimes just be observing people as they are. So let's talk about common types of research studies, right? So there's natural history studies. So this is collecting data over a long period of time and seeing how something, works out throughout your lifetime. So a great example of this is the Forward study. So a lot of you are probably enrolled or have heard about this. So lots of the FXCRC, actually, all the FXCRC sites support this Forward study. And they collect longitudinal data on you, just kind of checking in and seeing what Fragile X looks like for you and your family as you move forward in your life. There are behavioral research studies, which is sort of understanding the validity or effectiveness of a certain treatment. So a good example of that would be, say I know people in my clinic who are in ABA therapy, and I know some people who are not. I'm not placing them into ABA therapy, but maybe I'm gonna, see how things look for them as they move forward in their life. And then there's, commonly some screening or diagnostic studies. So, this could be a newborn screening. So every baby at a certain hospital gets the opportunity to do this screening, right? So I'm not placing them into a group. I'm giving them all the option to participate in this trial. And then the most common type of clinical trial that you've probably heard about is a drug trial. And I would say, there are these two categories that drug trials are, right? There's IND and then repurposing a drug. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So an IND is an investigative new drug. So this is a drug that is not approved by the FDA. It is not on market. You cannot go into your doctor's office and say, hey, I want to take this, because it's not available. But the goal of these, studies with INDs is to understand if this drug would be safe and effective for use in a population. Another popular way to study drugs is repurposing a drug. So, the drug is already FDA approved, it's on market, so you could technically go into your doctor's office and ask for it. And you're repurposing, which means you're using it for a different indication, so not what's on the label. So there's actually quite a bit of this going on in Fragile X. So things like metformin, right? That's approved to be used in type 2 diabetes care, but we use it to see if it, impacts any core symptomology of Fragile X. All right, so let's, all of these drugs go through clinical trial phases, and this is how you get a drug approved and on market. I'm not going to dive too deep into this. There's just 4 points I really want to make because I want you to know that this whole process is designed to keep you safe. So first, let's talk about the preclinical data. So before any drug even gets to human studies, meaning a human is actually going to take this drug, it has to go through extensive preclinical research. In order to even submit an IND, you have to have nice preclinical data to support that it's probably safe, and there's toxicology reports for that. The next thing I want to talk about is there's safety in every single phase. So I know that research can be scary to consider, especially a drug trial, but safety is the first and foremost thing that comes in every single phase of the clinical trial. I think it's also important to note that only about 33% of drugs move from phase 2 to phase 3. So part of, moving on is really showing that there might be effectiveness, and it's really hard to prove that if we're not doing a good job of enrolling the right people or accurately reporting what's going on in the trial. And then finally, this process, so bringing a drug to market, can take about an average of 12 years and up to $2.7 billion. So I'm not telling you that to get like sticker shock from you. I'm telling you that because I think it really underlines the fact that these clinicians, these researchers who are really working to change the outcomes in Fragile X are really in it for the long haul. And I'm hoping that that makes you feel really empowered and feel like they're backing you. All right, so basically that was my long-winded way of saying that we can't get to that phase 4 on the market without doing our phase 2 trials. And I know that that's easier said than done. So again, I think the best way to tell you about research is to continue to reiterate what keeps you safe. So along with, the federal regulations, the rules, and things like that we just talked about, there's lots of parameters and bodies that keep you safe at more of an institutional level. So every research study goes through an IRB, or an institutional review board, and the IRB's job is literally to protect human subjects. So protect people like you, your families, and make sure that their research is vetted prior to enrolling any, person. Most studies go through annual review as well. So every year this IRB is checking to make sure that the research is still safe. The next step would be, would be that the clinicians should be incredibly knowledgeable. It's their job to keep you safe. They're responsible for knowing the research protocol inside and out, and knowing a lot about those investigational products if you are using them. And a lot of these people have had a big hand in designing the study, and so they are, keeping you safe. One step down from that is an informed study team. So these clinicians are picking their study teams, they're training them, and every study team is required to do extensive training, whether it's internally from the sponsor of the research study or the institution, and they're only assigned to tasks that they're qualified for. So hopefully that makes you feel good too. And then of course you keep you safe, right? Because research is optional and you come first. So all of these people that I just talked about really, know and subscribe to the fact that research is never required, right? Research is voluntary. You can withdraw at any time. There's no penalty for your enrollment, and it will never replace or impact your clinical care. And so you really are at the forefront and can be your own best advocate along with the clinicians, with the study team, because your well-being is always going to come first. I also think if I'm going to empower you to be your own best advocate, you really need to know your rights. And so there's a long list of things that keep you safe and, are your rights, but let's just buzz through them really fast because I think it's important for you to hear. So you have the right to, read the consent form, take the time to decide whether or not this study is a good fit for you, and make that decision without any pressure. So again, just want to reiterate that you choose to be in a trial, it's voluntary, and it does not impact your clinical care. So if it's not the right time for you, that's okay. But sometimes research can be a great option if you feel like you need some supplementation to your clinical care. You have the right to refuse the study at all, and you certainly have the right to understand what will happen to you and the purpose of the trial or study, excuse me. Definitely need to understand the risks and benefits before you start, and if it's going to cost anything to you, and if you will be compensated for your time. It's also really important that you understand who's going to have access to the information that's collected about you and how your confidentiality is protected. All researchers, subscribe to HIPAA laws, and you're mostly de-identified, and so really the only people that should have the link to your being and your study information are the people who've enrolled you in that trial. And certainly you have the right to know who to contact when you have questions. And my best suggestion to you is to always ask to see the consent form before you enroll. Take some good time to read it. Consent forms are really nice because they're organized in a very clear way that goes through all of these things very clearly. So now that we've talked about what keeps you safe, let's talk about things that you can expect. So certainly you're not going to see every single one of these things. It's not exhaustive, but these are sort of common themes that we see in research studies. So let's, go through those. So you're always going to be asked to consent to participate. So let's talk about why. So that confirms, again, that you understand and are voluntarily committing to participate. So typically people are going to ask you to sign a consent form or give verbal consent. And again, that reiterates that you understand what you're getting into. You can withdraw your consent at any time if anything changes. And if something changes that the study team knows and it changes the risk-benefit profile of the study, they're required to re-consent you or explain that so that you can still assess if that's still a good fit for you. Blood collection. So I know this is one that makes a lot of people nervous. Not every study has blood collection, but when they do, there's a really important reason why. So typically when researchers are collecting blood, they're trying to confirm that the participant is healthy. So certainly you don't want anybody in research who is not healthy. And I think it's kind of great to know that people are really taking that into account. If you're on a drug trial, collecting blood intermittently throughout the trial can show us what kind of effects the drug may be having in your body and how your body is metabolizing that drug. you can typically expect some sort of physician or clinician visit. And this is really important too, right? Again, they're going to confirm that you're healthy. They're probably going to collect some baseline data. So, you know, how you or your child has developed, the psychological and medical history. And certainly, you know, these physicians and clinicians are typically the investigators. And so they're really interested in checking in on you and seeing about your experience and seeing and understanding if you feel like there's been any changes. Again, if you're on a drug trial, there's going to be drug-related procedures. So, you know, these are happening because we want to help you understand how to take that drug safely and correctly, because again, your safety is of utmost importance. And we certainly need to understand how you're taking the medication and if that medication is compliant. So remember how I said that there's only like 33% of trials that move from phase 2 to phase 3. We need to kind of make sure that it's easy to comply with the drug needs. So if you're taking it with food, or that you're taking it enough in order for it to be impactful. Typically, you're going to be asked to do report measures. So this helps us understand sort of the baseline, or what you or your child is walking around and your day-to-day looks like, what your behavior is like, your mood, your abilities, your skills. And then you're probably going to be asked to repeat these measures so that change can be tracked throughout this study. There's also probably going to be some direct participant testing. So the person who is actually the participant in the trial will probably do some sort of testing, whether it's memory or IQ, in order to just sort of see where they're at. And this, again, you know, may be repeated to track change throughout the study. A thing that's becoming much more popular, and certainly isn't in a lot of trials right now, is brain activity measures. So these can be things like EEG, TMS, fMRI, and these are non-invasive ways of understanding brain activity. And why would we want to do that? So it's helpful in terms of understanding drug effect, or what, you know, what your brain waves look like maybe compared to somebody else. And it can certainly measure your reaction to certain stimuli. And you should always, always expect a smart, kind study team, because you're doing them a huge favor, and research is always optional. So they value you, and you should certainly, you know, always feel comfortable to ask questions. These are things that are, you know, sometimes and not a given, but I think it's good for us to talk about, because then you can, again, like I've been saying over and over again, ask questions. So sometimes, you know, different research sites have different resources. They may be able to help you with travel. This is certainly something that you should ask up front if this is, you know, what you're concerned about. We understand that research is hard. It's uprooting you from your routine. And sometimes the study site is not close. So again, just knowing that that's a question that you can certainly ask up front. Some studies compensate you, which is really excellent. Again, you know, we understand this is your time. And so, you know, some studies will compensate you for that. There's also, you know, some study sites are equipped to provide you with study support materials. So that could be visual schedules about what to expect, social stories, and other support documents. So, you know, again, just ask. That can be really helpful in planning and getting ready to participate in a trial or study. So I kind of surveyed informally people, and I got the top 3 concerns with research, which is certainly consistent with what I encountered when I was a coordinator. So I heard blood draws, coming off of medications, and lots of study visits. And so I wanted to kind of give you maybe some recommendations that you can think about when you're assessing whether a study is a good fit for you. So if you're nervous about blood draws, or that's kind of one of the reasons why you choose not to participate, let's talk about you know, things that we can do to maybe mitigate that. So remember the why of blood, right? People understand that this is a bodily fluid. It's incredibly hard to get. They take it very seriously, but the reason they want to make sure that you're safe, and they need that data in order to move any drug through the drug process. So the why is really strong there, I think. You know, certainly ask if there are options. Again, different research sites have different things they can do: lidocaine, numbing cream, iPads to distract you, a papoose if that's something that you're interested in. You know, lots of places have trained phlebotomists too, which is excellent. So again, just understanding sort of what the options are and what the resources are, and having a really upfront conversation with the study team. And make sure you're preparing yourself and your child. So again, asking for what you need, social stories, having that conversation, planning before and after, thinking of a reward, right? We're gonna go do work. We're gonna go see the doctor, and then we're going to, you know, insert preferred activity here. Next, coming off current medications. So this is a big one, and I am certainly not, you know, a medical doctor. But so I'm just going to encourage you to have those conversations with your current doctor, the person who's prescribing your medications, and the study doctor. So understand, why they're asking you to come off those medications. Is there a really harmful interaction? Is that medication that you're on, maybe the, investigational product, the goal is to see if it can replace that medication? There can be some really good reasons why. So just, I think understanding sometimes can help inform your decision. And definitely, all study physicians are going to be really interested in having those conversations with you and helping you decide, because that's their job, and certainly want you to be well informed. There could be substitutes, and you can just feel more comfortable having that exchange up front. And then lots of study visits. So I shouldn't say all, most research protocols are designed so that, life happens, you get sick, your child gets sick, people, unfortunately pass away, or you need flexibility. And so most study visits have a window. That means there's a little bit of wiggle room should something happen. I would also recommend that you map out the visits as much in advance as possible. So if you know that, this study is 5 months long and you have to come in once a month, let's put it on the calendar, and then if you need some flexibility, it's coming up and you can have that conversation early instead of having to do it the day of. And then definitely ask about options. So sometimes I know when you're being told about a study, they say, 6 research visits in 2 weeks, but maybe they mean that there's, 4 phone calls and 1 in-person visit and 1 at home. And so just really understanding what research visit means, because a lot of these studies now are coming to your homes, or they do include phone calls and things like that. So, here are my quick do's and don'ts of participating in research to sort of wrap up what we've been talking about. So please do read the consent form. That's going to be the greatest source of information outside of the study team. That's sort of the first way that you're going to find out what you're doing. Do understand your rights as a research participant, and certainly ask a lot of questions. Ask them at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, afterwards. Our goal is to make sure that you're really well informed. Definitely say what you need. If you need a break, say you need a break. If you think that you or your child would do better splitting up the visit, you can always ask. I can't promise that the answer will always be yes, but there is power in asking. And I like to say that there's something for everybody, so certainly start small. If a drug trial is not for you, see if you can maybe think about enrolling in Forward or, a biobank, something very simple to kind of get your feet wet and then move on from there. Things that I would recommend that you do not do. Please don't try to get into a study. So what I mean by that is, don't over-report because you really want to be in this study and you think it's really important. We think it's really important too, but those studies are designed very specifically to have the most impact. And so if you're not a good candidate, you certainly wouldn't want to participate in this study. Please don't share the details on social media. So in order for the trial to be most successful, it's going to be really important that nobody is biased, including potential participants, including clinicians. And so that's a really important piece. And then please don't enroll in more than 1 treatment study at a time. So it's certainly fine to be in, lots of different observational studies, but I would always check just to be sure. And you certainly shouldn't be in a drug trial along with a device trial, because then how are we going to tease out, what's really making the impact? So now that I've hopefully encouraged you to consider research studies, where would you find them? And so I know I said earlier, so the foundation's always had research options on their website, but there's now this amazing portal called My Fragile X Research. And it's a really user-friendly way to filter and search for, research studies for any Fragile X associated diagnosis. So you can sort by gender, you can sort by, location of the research visit and what type of study it is, a trial, a study, or a survey. And so this is kind of putting, empowering you to look for something that may fit best for you. I would encourage you to reach out to Fragile X clinics. So a lot of them have complementary research programs and or can show you to a great program that they believe does good research. And then you always have clinicaltrials.gov. So any clinical trial that's going on is required to submit to clinicaltrials.gov, and it's pretty user friendly. You can type in what you're looking for and it should pop up. And so I just want to end on why research is important. So I believe that research can really change your quality of life. So I know that blood draws are hard. I know that swallowing pills can be really hard, but these are skills that, research can help you achieve. You can improve your quality of life by learning how to do some of these things, and that will serve you long past when the research study is over. Research can lead to outcomes that are very specific to our community. So right now, there's not really any medication or therapy that's specifically approved to treat Fragile X, and it would be so great if we had things that were just special for us. But I want to say that with a caveat that there's many things that can help you now, so don't fret. And it can certainly help families like yours. So Missy at the Fragile X Foundation reminded me of this, and I think it was really eloquent, so I just used her words. So the outcomes may not be what you had hoped, but you still definitely made an impact, and your participation is still important. So maybe you didn't get what you thought, maybe that drug is not on the market, maybe you did not see huge marked change in your life, but negative results are also important because it informs the researchers on maybe what's not working. And so I think Dr. Liz said this before, research is a marathon, not a sprint. Certainly quality over quantity. If we do it really well and pay attention, we can certainly get to an ending altogether that we're proud of. So I think I've probably done enough talking to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen and Lesley, who are both, incredible women, incredible moms, and have done research with their kids, and can certainly share some tips and things much better than I can. So yeah, take it away, Jen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me be a part of this webinar. We received our diagnosis in 2010 after our daughter Riley was born. Our son Nate was just almost 2 years old, and we had been noticing delays for quite a while, and it wasn't until after she was born that we got our official diagnosis. And then we had Finn about 2.5 years ago, utilizing IVF with PGD because we knew the diagnosis and wanted to try to stop it for our family. We were very lost when we first got our diagnosis, and we were originally scheduled to see the genetic counselors at Stanford University in California, where we were originally from. And upon, searching Fragile X syndrome on Google, like you're not supposed to, I was lucky enough, of course, to find the National Fragile X Foundation's website and got the phone number for UC Davis, the Mind Institute up in Sacramento. And so with the help of our pediatric neurologist who gave us our diagnosis, they were able to get us referred up there. And the only way that we were able to get in to see Rondi Hagerman in a timely manner at that time was to participate in what was called the baby study. So we could have paid out of pocket, thousands of dollars to get our first appointment under our belt, but that wasn't super feasible for us at that time. And so Rondi requested that we hold out a couple months and come in for the baby study. So that really opened the doors for us. We had a great experience doing the baby study. And we were able to get both of our children seen by Rondi at that time. And that just kind of snowballed for us into an opportunity for us to participate in many more research studies that were happening. I put the list of them up there that I could think off the top of my head. We've pretty much been involved almost every single year with at least one study of some sort. Most all of them have happened at the Mind Institute up in Sacramento, just because was kind of our home clinic for the time being. Stanford University did the girl band study in 2018, and we participated in that with our daughter. And that was a lot of fun as well. So right now we're finishing up our CBD gel study through the Mind Institute, and our family just moved across the United States from California to Minnesota. So we are set to start at Rush University with Dr. Kravis here next month, or actually it's this month now. And so we're excited to see what other opportunities will lie ahead for us. I would say that, like Hilary said, not all studies are going to be a perfect fit for your family, and it's really important that you find what's going to work for you and for your family, and make sure you know the accommodations that can happen like she said, not everybody can do a blood draw, or not everybody can travel outside their home long distances or short distances for that matter. So just really understanding exactly what is required of you as a participant, and then asking. You'll never know if there can be a different accommodation made if you don't ask. And we've not ever had to ask for any accommodations until we've done our last study. And we've had to make a few changes in order to make sure that it worked for our family, but also that it worked and stayed within the sponsor's requirements. So that was our first experience, and we've not had any issues. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to discuss, what it's been like to be in different trials and the travels that we've done and what kind of appointments, I guess you could call them, would be that we've had. So that's about all I have from my end.
I'm trying to get it to advance. There we go.
Yay, there we are. Hi, everybody. I am Lesley Weaver. I thank you as well for having me. We've had the privilege of working with Hilary for the past few years at the Cincinnati clinic, and we are very grateful that she's staying with the Fragile X community. We live in Taylor Mill, Kentucky, which is probably about 20 minutes away from Cincinnati Children's Medical Center, where the clinic is. Let's see, we have all my pictures there. Brock's 11, Drew's 9, Tyrus is 7, and we were diagnosed in 2012 when Brock was 4, Drew was 2, and Tyrus was 1. I did the same thing. I Googled everything. We had all kinds of therapies already in place, and actually great local pediatricians. They just kept waiting for the light bulb to go off, they kept saying, until we ran into a pediatrician in our practice that had heard of Fragile X. And we got tested. The results came back quickly, and it was actually a pretty good moment for us. We had some answers and we had some direction. And at that time, Dr. Erickson had just come to the Cincinnati Fragile X clinic, and there was actually like a Cincinnati Children's Hospital fundraiser and like a big walk for the whole hospital. And we went to that, and we met Dr. Erickson and his family, and we met a bunch of other Fragile X families that just like scooped us up and took us under their wing, and just said, answered so many questions. We were clueless, but then again, we were glad to have answers finally of all the delays and all the sorts of things that a lot of us families see with our children. And along with that, just kind of every checkup we had, there'd just be, this research study is going on. Would you like to participate? And I just naturally always said yes. I didn't really know what I was getting into when we started, but we just kind of went with the flow. And if we qualified and the study team thought it would, potentially help our family and the community at large, we said yes. And we kind of just went from there. We're currently probably in our most, I don't want to use the word intense, but the most interesting study so far is the FX Learn, the Neuronext that my youngest son Ty is in. I think he's been in it for a little over a year and 4 months. And that's another one that I guess intimidating was the word when when we first looked at the consent and all the visits, and I can see where, how are we going to fit all this in? But we've had a lot of success with it, a very cooperative clinic team, and there are a lot of visits, and we just kind of take them one visit at a time. As Hilary mentioned, we have them all on our calendar 6 months out kind of thing. There's EEGs, there's blood draws, there's urine samples that we're not the best at, but the the clinic teams have helped us so much with different options to collect things like blood and urine, and making the boys comfortable always, breaks throughout the day. And it's just kind of part of our routine now. I mean, they know kind of what to expect when we go down to the hospital, and I think that helps. And I just think that, you know, and about the reward, the Cincinnati clinic happens to be right around the corner from the zoo. So often when we finish a study, they know they get to go to the zoo, which is a huge bonus for them. And I would just say that, you know I'm the expert on my child, so I'm there to assist the study team with that. But I do consider them then the experts on the studies. They've been trained way more than I have, way more than any consent form could ever tell me, or overview of the study. So I have always trusted them, and they've never led us astray. And I think the best thing to do is just work together. And that's what gets my boys through it. And that's about all I have right now.
Thank you, Jen and Lesley. And Hilary, do you have any other slide that you want to show before we start taking questions?
I would just say thank you. Thank you to everybody. Jane, thank you. Thank you, Lesley and Jen. Certainly thank you to the foundation, and of course, the Cincinnati Fragile X Research and Treatment Center, the Tri-State Alliance, and then of course all of you. So, and then you can reach out to Jane or I with any questions. And Lesley and Jen were very kind and provided their emails as well if you want the parent perspective.
So we don't have any questions that have come in yet, but one thing that I have gotten questions about from other families is, can you talk a little bit more about what an IRB is and the role they play? Sometimes when you become so familiar with it, you just throw that term around. And I'm not sure everybody, does everyone have an IRB? Does even the pharmaceutical companies, who has IRBs?
Yeah, Jane, that's a great question. So any human subjects research has to be managed and approved by an IRB. So pharmaceutical companies will use, sometimes, and this is happening now more commonly, even on an academic level, there's the option to use a single IRB. So all the research sites, whether there's 20, whether there's 2, use one IRB that approves their research. But every certainly academic institution that does research has an IRB. So an IRB is that institutional review board. Every study that comes in, you have to propose, right? You have to write a protocol, you have to share your study design, you have to share the purpose, and it goes to the IRB, which is made up of lots of different people with lots of different skills. People who have research familiarity, people who are experts in different, clinical or medical situations. And there's also people who are, from your community who sit on the IRB, and they talk through if the study is impactful, if it's safe, and then you get approved. And then, like I said, this studies go through annual review. So they're just kind of checking to see how enrollment's gone, if anything, egregious has happened, and what the study team, is thinking moving forward. Is that helpful?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on, I was mute. So that was very helpful. And so what I was wondering now is if you could talk just a little bit more about what happens in each of the phases, and so where some of the trials are now, like what phase are they in, and how'd they get there, and then what would happen after the phase that they're currently in.
Okay, so a lot of the trials that are going right now are in phase 2, right? So this not the teeniest group of people, but not the largest. And they're still studying, you know, safety and dosing. So what's the right dose to give to people that's still safe? How does this drug work? And how is it, you know, impacting, you know, what we think it should or could. And then, you know, those will move into phase 3, which are those larger scale studies. Because Fragile X is considered a rare disease, you know, our large scale studies aren't like, you know, cancer research where it's thousands of people. But we still, you know, it needs to happen in a larger body of people to, you know, show that there is effectiveness, and then again continue to show that it's safe to be used in people. Is that helpful?
So yes, you know, I mean, I think that, you know, like you said, you know, it's only what, like a third of the trials make it past phase 2. Right.
And so you have to be able to show that there's some effectiveness. And it's really hard to do that if the reporting is off or we let our bias control it. And so that's why you're seeing more introduction of these measures that kind of take out some of that bias. Things like EEG, blood testing, that really are, you know, can potentially track change in a way that's not dependent on somebody observing your behavior and then giving their a subjective opinion.
And so why is it that most trials don't progress further? Is it participants or is it success of the trial or the medication or drug?
That's a good question. I don't know that I'm fully equipped to answer that. I think it's many different things. Certainly level of participation, certainly showing positive results, because we've been so dependent on parent and clinician report measures. Sometimes it's really hard to show change, even though anecdotally you may see, you know, you hear families say how much it's changed their child or themselves, or you can observe it as a researcher. If the, you know, paper measures aren't lining up, it's really hard to, you know, quote, prove that there's been an effective change. And so, you know, that's where sort of these more technical things, EEG, blood, get integrated in.
And so I think you said that things like EEG are pretty new with regards to seeing what kind of changes some of the medications. Are they using those in most of the I'll say clinical trials right now?
To my knowledge, so again, not a PI, so nobody, you know, don't quote me, but I think EEG especially has been introduced into a lot of the clinical trials because there's potential there to impact, you know, not every drug is going to work for every person. And so in medicine in general, I think there's this theme of pushing forward towards personalized medicine. So understanding the cohort of people that are going to best, you know, react, or this drug is going to, you know, impact them the most. And so EEG could be one of those things that help us determine drug response and why it works for some people and why it doesn't.
Okay. And then I know on if you want to talk a little bit more maybe about the My Fragile X research page on the foundation website, that maybe a little bit more about some of the studies that are on there.
Sure. Jane, I wonder if I should show it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't, and you know, you guys tell me if I'm missing anything, but I haven't had any questions come in, and so I'm but yeah, if you can show your screen on it, that would be great.
Okay, let me do that. Let's see if it'll work.
Well, and while you're pulling that up, I think it's, you know, we I would want everyone on the webinar tonight to know that we receive requests for all kinds of studies, from surveys all the way to clinical trials that Hilary is showing on the screen right now. And Hilary and I both go through, whether it's even a research, whether it's a survey or, all the way to clinical trial. We do a thorough review of what's being asked of our families, and before it makes it to our website. It's not like we post every single thing that comes in. We go through and we take the survey. We talk to the researchers. We make sure that it's something that is appropriate for families and not burdensome to them. So you can talk a little bit more about what's on the website.
Yeah, I mean, Jane, you make great points, right? I should have added us as one of the bodies that keeps you safe because really that is our goal, right? We don't want to ask you or have you consider something that Jane or I wouldn't be willing, to consider for ourselves or someone in our family. And so it's really important to us that the foundation plays an integral role in reviewing this research, that you feel safe and there's just that extra level of trust there. So like Jane said, there's this, well, Jane has worked very hard on this, and so has Dan Whiting, and so you really should give all the kudos to them. There's this excellent My Fragile X research portal that you can find under our research and going to the clinical trial search. And I think, one of the best things is this little search box. So you can search by trial, by study, by survey, and it defines these for you. So, if you could barely make it through my talk, you can have a little reminder. And when you click something, it then, populates below what you're looking for. And then, if you decide, maybe that's not for me, you can pick something else. I think what's also great is, it has all the Fragile X associated conditions and even options for, people who have no known diagnosis. So sometimes we have siblings or good family friends who want to help. And there are certainly options for people outside of the Fragile X community and also within it. I certainly have heard that sometimes people don't feel like there's enough options as a carrier. And so, we want to make sure that that there are research studies out there for you. Yeah, definitely awesome to be able to search by, where the research takes place, because, like Jen said, it can be hard to get there. And so sometimes it can be, done from your home, or it will include travel reimbursement. This portal right now has migrated all the studies that lived on the foundation website prior to the portal, and they're in here now. And now we can click on any study and kind of see what was on there before in a really nice, succinct way. And you're able to kind of ask for more information if you want it through here. And so, we're hoping that people will continue to submit their research projects to this so that we can create the most, all-encompassing portal for you so that all of your options and you can start small if you want to. There's also this really excellent FAQ and resource section, which I think does an excellent job of, answering really common questions. Jane, what did I miss? What else should we talk about on here?
Well, one thing that I just thought about, going back to the IRB approvals that we get for the trials, even the information that is on the website that we post, that describes the study, has to be IRB approved. The information, we're not making up the information. It's gone through, again, iterations and been approved before it even gets onto our website.
Right.
And each study now, a requirement of new studies that are going onto the website, we'll all have to go through, we'll have an FAQ. So we'll be doing a frequently asked questions for each study that's posted on the website, just to give you more information.
Right, great point.
I think the other thing is that families should know that there are studies and surveys and trials going on all over the country. Many of them are at the Fragile X clinics, but not all of them. And so by going onto this site, you can see that they're whether you go someplace and go to a trial or you want to do it from the comfort of your home, that there's something for everyone right here.
Mm-hmm.
See, does let me see, does let me open up the mics for Jen or Lesley, do you have anything that you would like to add?
This is Lesley. I did want to say that kind of in reference to one of Hilary's last comments on her presentation, no matter the outcomes, you're still helping everyone as a whole. And I wanted to add that no matter what our outcomes have been for each study, we always benefit throughout the study. Like, for instance, again, the FX Learn that we're in now, that's intensive speech and communications therapy throughout the whole thing that we're essentially getting for free. And yes, there's a medication along with it, but or like the behavioral studies we're in, we're getting professional, the best of the best type therapies for our children, targeted towards them, just by participating in the study. So that's always been another plus for us. I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you. I think that's real important for families to know that, yeah, I mean, there's multiple benefits about being in trials and studies. Jen, how about you?
I think one of the things that we've enjoyed is not only, the aspect of potentially helping ourselves and helping other families out there, but it's the people that I get to meet while we are there at our visits. We've met a few families through the years and watched our kids grow, in person. A lot of times we are all just Facebook friends from around the country. And I've had the opportunity to stay in touch with some families and see them back at the Mind Institute or Stanford, wherever we're at, doing our research studies, and I get to see where they're at, which is always great. It's always nice seeing another family and where they're at, where they've come from, and be able to catch up. And it's like a little mini vacation for us when we get to see those other families also participating and catch up with them. So it's always great to have the the research side of it, but there's also the social aspect of it as well. We get to see our clinicians that we try to keep in touch with pretty frequently, but then we also get to see those families and friends that we've made through the years, and so that's always been pretty fun for us to go back and see who's there on our next visit.
That's a really nice aspect. Thank you both for sharing those that information. I know one thing that parents have asked about, and Hilary and I plan to work on over the next month or so, are development of more social stories to assist families in their visits. And I know some of these studies require several visits, and we're even looking at creating several social stories to help families for each of their visits, being able to make them specific to the location, to the people you'll visit, rooms you'll go to. I mean, that's our goal, is to show that level of detail for families, just to ease the visits for their child or children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to echo, Jane, if you don't mind what you're saying, I mean, we certainly are so open to hearing what your experiences are, what has been helpful to you, things that you would like replicated. We know there are rock star research, sites who do great things that support you and make you want to come back. And we would love to, scale those in a way that helps all families like yours. I think Jane and I both feel really strongly about that. So yeah, please share, please reach out to us.
Well, and just to add to that, you know, I think that we all know that we have some doctors out there that are pretty amazing people who have dedicated their lives to not only helping people with Fragile X syndrome and all the Fragile X conditions in their daily lives, but to finding, you know, better treatments and better, you know, well, you know, ultimately a cure for the condition, but that, you know, they've dedicated their lives to doing this, and you know, they never cease to amaze me. They're, you know, I'm, you know, so in awe of these doctors, and so they work really hard to get these trials going, to keep them going, and to bring people in. And so, you know, we try to do everything we can for them because they do so much for us and for our families. So if with that, I think we'll, I don't know, Hilary, if you have any closing comments that you would like to make.
You know, I would just reiterate that please reach out to us with questions, comments, concerns. Certainly myself and Jane are, you know, excited to talk to you about research if you're considering it, or if there's really reasons that you aren't. I feel pretty strongly that that's my role, is to sort of help you navigate this space and do it in a way that you feel safe and supported. And just, you know, thank you to everybody at the foundation who's been really flexible with me as I've started my first month. Certainly thank you, you know, to Cincinnati, and of course, you know, Jen and Lesley and all the parents and people that I've, you know, met and gotten to work with. So yeah, thanks.
Lesley or Jen, Lesley, do you have any closing comments?
Just thank you guys again for having us. We'll continue to do what we do and hope everyone jumps on board. And as Jen mentioned, I'm available to talk to any parents or families that would like to discuss our experience. And thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Jane.
Great. Jen?
Just thank you. It's always a great opportunity to be a part of something like this.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for everything that both of you have done. So, so with that, I think we'll, you know, have just a couple of closing comments. Thank you, Hilary, so much for sharing your expertise. We're excited to have you on the foundation. I look forward to continue working with you. We will have more webinars this year. Dan and I are in the process of scheduling them right now. We've got some legal topics of guardianship and other legal issues coming up in September, and then we have the we believe it to be the 8th year that Dr. Erickson will be doing his webinar on medications in October. So be sure to watch your emails for that. Again, these webinars are made possible by your donations. Please consider making a donation at fragilex.org. And Hilary, again, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and I hope you all stay cool. And don't forget, you can email me or Hilary anytime with any question. Until then, thank you. And this is Jane Dixon Weber signing off.